Hey, it's Don, the Auction Professor here. Today we're going to give you out another BOLO. This is a specific item from a specific thing. We're going to talk about the Hindenburg, not just the disaster. Many people just think the Hindenburg blew up and that was the flight. It actually flew many flights before that. I actually have covers and postcards from the Hindenburg, which I've shown in videos, and I'm going to post a couple of those in my Instagram feed as well. There are a lot of items available. They don't go for insane amounts of money because, again, it wasn't the first flight. It flew many, many times before it. But we're going to go over the screen right now and we're going to talk about the Hindenburg. So here we are at the collectible side of the Hindenburg. Now, there are many other ships. There's actually a designation for each one of these actual dirigibles. The designation for the Hindenburg was LZ-129. It was originally going to be 128, but there were some design changes due to a crash or an explosion of a British airship due to the hydrogen and such forth that they were using. So they actually switched up what they were going to use for the ship and changed the construction. It was actually launched in 1936. It didn't explode until 1937. So there was many times that it flew across the Atlantic and around the globe. So it's not just one single flight. So items do show up, and they're not super horrendously expensive considering the notoriety of the ship, again, because of how many items were actually produced. Other people bring back connotations to, like, the Titanic and how rare some of the items were for that. That's a different story because that actually happened on its maiden voyage. It only went out once. So this is something totally different. There's a ton more items available for the Hindenburg. Even uniforms show up occasionally. So across the gamut, there's all kinds of stuff. All the stuff you see, or I'm going to show you here on the Hindenburg, show up across the gamut, and they cross all the categories that I already sell in. So I do see and run across these items. And again, as I said, I do have several personal items that I've saved and decided to keep from the Hindenburg, some postcards and some actual covers that were mailed aboard it, and I'm going to post those on Instagram if you're curious. They'll be up today at some point as well. So first item here is an actual sign. This is a cardboard sign from it. Again, just like anything else, any flight was advertised. American Airlines did have passenger flights that went from, say, California to Amherst, New Jersey, and they actually could take from that point the Hindenburg across the Atlantic. Because at the time when the Hindenburg was launched, it was the fastest, best way to get across the actual Atlantic. So anyway, this one went for $395. Next one here is a menu card. Now, again, there was tons of flights before the crash or the explosion, so you will see stuff like this. They're not super horrendously rare. Now, ones dated from the day of the crash are always worth a ton more money, especially ones with burn marks or things like that. Burned letters and things like that do show up at philatelic auctions that were actually sealed in like a post office slip so they can say, hey, it was damaged in transit. Those kind of things show up. This one went for $150. And it actually has a menu card along with the chef, actually, the cook from the actual ship, if I'm not mistaken. So, rather interesting piece of history. Again, they do show up. It's not super, super rare or scarce. So don't get scared off by thinking you're never going to find something like this. People will miss what this is, believe it or not. I bought postcards for a couple dollars from the Hindenburg, and I've sold those in the past. Nowadays, I hang on to them, but... Next one here is a new museum quality model, $735. It's well done. It's a finished example of this. It's really interesting, really nice example in my opinion. I love this sort of thing. I wouldn't put it in my house, but it's a really neat, interesting thing. And there we go with the LZ-129. Again, that is the designation of the ship. It actually was marked that, I believe, on the tail fin, as well as another spot on the actual ship itself. Now, the next item here is an actual Oyster Glass. There might be some other name or other use for it. It might be a dessert glass. I'm not really sure what this is. I'll have to trust his judgment on this. He's had other items from this ship before as well. They do show up. Plates, dishes, saucers, ashtrays, glassware, even some fixtures from the actual ship have shown up. So, again, don't think it's super rare to find something from something like this. I've had Titanic pieces, so, postcards do show up fairly regularly because they were released prior to the Titanic actually being launched. So, again, this is another perfect example of stuff. $600 for this one here. Next one here is a wind vane. It doesn't actually say the Hindenburg, but they're all kind of tied to that same kind of... Now here's a travel brochure for its last years of flight. This is just a perfect example of what you would find. This is from the last year. The last flights are on here, so this one's worth some money. $361. What you really want are from the last flights, the last couple flights. That's really the ones that you want. This one's day of the crash, mail for return. Some of this survived without incident, so there are some actual covers that were on board when it exploded and still made it through, believe it or not. Not very many, a handful from what I've seen, and I've seen mostly burned ones though. But anyway, $350 on this one. Here's a plate, $350. Now, there's more of these than some of the other items. It doesn't necessarily have to be from the Hindenburg for the most part, because other actual dirigibles had China that would have been labeled pretty much the same or similar, because it was an actual company that ran these, and they all designed all the like dishware and things the same. Just like the White Star Titanic plates didn't say specifically the Titanic, it actually was for their whole line. So just keep that in mind on any of these type of items. Here's a postcard, really nice one. It's over New York, it looks like. It's just a nice image. This is Art Deco. It's really, really spectacular image here, in my opinion. $345. Here's a photograph when it's at Lakehurst from 1936. I'm not sure what's going on here, but he's washing the windows is what he's doing. Rather interesting. You can kind of get a gist on, how the cabin was set up, because those are cabin windows or like social areas, dining rooms and things along that line. It held like 80 or 90 passengers and I think like 20 or 30 crew members. When it actually crashed, I think only 36 people died, but the vast majority of the people actually survived the crash. So anyway, this one's $300. Photos do very well this type of material, in my opinion. Here's another one. This one's signed by the actual crew of it. I'm surprised it only went for this much. It just seems like it would be something that would have went for more. But again, people might not be able to ID these. There might be some question on the authenticity and such forth on this. So $260 isn't bad, in my opinion. Here's a cover. This is the third North American flight. Again, LZ-129. That's what you look for on these. Any of the Graf Zeppelin dirigibles are worth some money, but the most popular one is the Hindenburg. Some of the other ones actually go for more, but this is the one that's more collected and that you will find more items. It made multiple trips to the U.S. as well, too, so covers do show up. This is a fancy one. These were done sometimes just for collectors. $235. Next one's another cover. Now, I've acquired many just like this with the same stampings. And it actually has Olympics mark on it there because it was flown over the Berlin Olympics. You can see it says via air, Hindenburg actually on the top, to North America. That's what that German stand for. Mit is with, Luftschiffe is actually via air, and then Hindenburg, and Nach is the designation Nord America, which is North America. So I took German in high school years back. I know a little still. $210. Now, newspapers, again, I've talked about it many times. Disaster newspapers always go. I've got a couple in here, too. This one went for $167. Another newspaper, $152. Any newspaper sell from the disaster. Now, here's a candy or chocolate mold. Now, I have a video just up about them as well, too. I have a link right up here if you're interested. This is a perfect example. Doesn't have to be the Hindenburg, but most people are going to put that in the listing because that's the most popular one they know, and more people will probably look up that one than, any of the other LZ ships that were out there. So anyway, $179 on this one. Next one are some actual uniform buttons from the actual line, the company line, the Graf Zeppelin line. Doesn't necessarily mean they were actually ever on the Hindenburg, but people on the Hindenburg would have worn this button or other varieties of this same button in the past. So 115 on this one. Now here's just an autograph from one of the crew members. This was a big thing after the accident, gathering up documents from people that were on it or died or things like that. And it's just a typical thing people do, even down to the chef, which I have another item shown up here. $112 for this one. More buttons, and again, the other design you see there on the right, and then you have the LZ marked buttons, which actually would have been worn as well by some members of the crew. There's brass buttons, and these are horn or pressed, like maybe a rubber style in some form. $110 on these. Next one, here's another postcard. Now, this was flown on the Hindenburg as well. You can see by the actual postmark on there. Europe to North America, German airmail, airship Hindenburg. It actually is stated on there. It's got the year, the date, the whole works on there. $108. Again, they're not super expensive. You will find many more U.S. items worth far more than this, so... Next one here is a crew member who saved some of the passengers. It's actually his autograph on a photo. And you will see this sort of thing around. This is a promotional photo, it looks like, too. $170. Next one is a flight brochure. It's basically just a schedule. So if it had more details, information, prices, cabin information, or anything like that, it would be worth more. This is from the earlier year that it flew, 1936. If it was later, again, it would be worth more. Only $59. So again, these are accessible, and you will run into some of these if you look hard enough. As I found them, I know many other people have found them. Do a search. There's 1,000 or more items from the Hindenburg up at any given time, any day of the week. So now here's a passengers list from the SS Bremen on its way to the actual LZ 29. And this is just another example of some of the history that goes along with some of these items. People would have booked a ship, and then from there they would have actually taken the Hindenburg over across the Atlantic, just like American Airlines offered flights to Amherst or wherever the flight Lakehurst, wherever it happened to be going at that time. So $100 on this. Here's another postcard. Now, this is dining room in the actual Zeppelin. I've had one of these maybe 8-10 years ago. They do show up, but they're extremely rare. But they don't go for a ton of money because they do show up. $120 on this one. Something you could possibly find. Someone could easily miss what this is just by looking at it and think just by looking at the front that it's actually just some restaurant or something. So they all don't fully advertise everything on it as what it is on the face. So take that into consideration, why people would miss this. Next one here is a photo while it was flown over Philadelphia. It's actually been in Ohio, my state, believe it or not. So it's made its way around the country. So $87 for this one with the odd frame on it. Here's another item. This is from the LZ-130, though, instead of the LZ-129. It's the Hindenburg class ships. It's actually a sterling or silver pin of some sort. Rather interesting. It's sold for $81. This could be missed because of its size. So just keep that in mind. Next one here is a tour pin badge. Again, this could have been worn by a crew member or actually by passengers who could have bought it on the ship or on the dock when they were actually exiting. So they do show up. There's silver versions of these, some of these as well, too, sterling versions. Nicely marked, nice original, $76 with some nice enamel on it. Now here's just an autograph photo from the actual chef on the back of a photo of the actual Zeppelin. So it's a nice, interesting image here. Now this is stated to be a sample piece of the actual Hindenburg. No way to know if it is. I personally wouldn't mess with something like this without some very substantial documentation dating back to the time of the crash. People just milk this out. There was a ton of it around, so, you know, they did sell pieces of it at the time. People did pick up pieces, so it's not unheard of. They're not super scarce, the real ones, but anybody could market anything and say that's what it's from, so just keep that in mind. Another photo. Now, this is from when it was in Ohio. It's a 5x3 from someone's album or something, so $73. $73.99. Now here's a cigarette card book set. It's 265 ones. There's a ton of these throughout the 1920s, 30s, and even a few into the 40s. This isn't necessarily the Hindenburg at all, but this is the predecessor to the Hindenburg. People will throw that in there in the title just because people will know the name Hindenburg, and they might look up stuff just like that, and they might buy it just because it looks like the Hindenburg. So $100 on these. They're not super rare, so don't find a bunch of these cards thinking you're going to make a ton of money, because even loose, they don't go for much money. Another postcard. Now this one is a big ordeal because this is the first time a piano was ever on any type of air transportation. So rather interesting. You can see it's actually mounted to the floor. Typical example. This is an inside shot. Something that someone would miss if it was on a postcard. This is a promotional photo, which they made tons of these type of material back in the day. It was a propaganda machine, as I said. So they made all kinds of stuff. So wherever it landed, you could buy items. They promoted it. So almost $60 on this one here. Not super rare. Next one here is a cocktail shaker in the shape of a blimp, a dirigible, Zeppelin, so to speak. Again, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Hindenburg, but they will put it in here. It's the right era. You know, it's Art Deco. Not worth a ton of money either, $51. Next one here is a little pin. This would have just been stuck into your, like, lapel or something like that. It's a smaller pin. This one's fairly common. I've had one of these in my life, so they will show up occasionally. $50. I would have probably done 100 as a bin with the best offer and seen what happened. I probably would have gotten 75 for it, truthfully. Next one here is a luggage label. I've had a couple of these on rare occasions. They made mass quantities of this just for advertising purposes, so they will show up occasionally. There are reproductions of this one here. This one I've looked at. It does look to be an original in my book. It has everything that it should have. It only went for $50. I've sold many labels way more than that for airlines, so it's not super rare. Don't think it's rare when you find it. It's not a huge score, but it's a good score. Next one here is a aluminum bracelet with a dirigible on it. Now, the person stating down in there that the previous owner stated that it was from the Hindenburg, but there's no way to know whatsoever. There's a ton of these. I looked at this fairly closely. There's no way to say for sure because it's kind of like a generic image. Unless it had LZ-129, there's no way to say it's from the Hindenburg, no matter what somebody says without some provenance or certified information on it. So anyway, $50 is still a nice piece. And the next one here is just a model. They still make models of the Hindenburg and other items like this. So $45, it was a buy it now, it was sold very quickly. They might have been able to get 75 out of it again. I would have binned this up for 100 and just went from there. So anyway, that's just an idea on the things. There's hundreds of other different types of items across the board. There's even die-cast little ships and things, toys, commemorative plates, new items, covers, cachets, stamps. I mean, just across the board, there's a ton of items from this. Trade cards as well, as I've shown. So well, there you go. There's some more items that I look for. Hopefully that gave you some ideas and some thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.